Okay.
You're live.
All right. Welcome to the VitaSite sponsored webinars on human islet isolation. You can't see me because we had little issues about Mac PC compatibility to get David's slides working. So uh, I'm live, but I'm not seeing you in video. The seminar is going to be about 25 to 40 minutes. You can ask questions at any time during the webinar by using the chat function. We will have review those Q&As at the end of the session, at the end of the webinar. I've also attached a table summarizing human islet yields from labs who compared the effectiveness of different enzymes within their laboratory. Please feel free to download if you want to have your results included in that table, since it's a reference table. Please just contact me. So, introductions. I really have the honor of introducing David Scharp to give this presentation. As you know, David's contributions at WashU with Paul Lacey were seminal to the development of islet transplantation. So I think he needs very little introduction. I think the best tribute that I heard about David's work was from Ray Rajat when he gave a keynote presentation a number of years ago at the IPETA meeting. And basically, as many of you know, Ray moved from trying to freeze whole organs and he moved to islets. And at that time, Ray said that David was the expert and the leader. He knew everything about islet isolation. And I think, again, the foundations of this field have been stand atop David's work with Paul Lacey in making islet transplantation a reality. So, without further ado, I will introduce David. And again, thank you very much for giving this webinar for us.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate everyone tuning in. What I'm going to do today is share with you all the data that I'm preparing to publish but have not published. So it's kind of a unique opportunity for me to get your input as we go along through these slides or at the end, whichever is more convenient for you. I want to use this information not only to provide you up-to-date current information that we've not published yet, but this presentation will be a later publication, and get your input on if it's clear, if it's not clear, whatever. So anyway, what I'm concentrating on today is in the title that's showing there, producing large-scale purified human islets to global academic and corporate investigators for their diabetes research. And basically that title summarizes what Prodo Labs is actually doing. Oops, I have to hit the right button over here. So if we look at human islet yields for global research programs, we only accept human pancreas donors for processing into human islets. In that way, each donor has to have already donated at least one organ for clinical transplant. And the advantage for us and for recipients of these islets is it assures that the lack of major infectious diseases and any evidence of any malignancy are gone. And the organ donation companies must provide us written proof of their compliance for all human organ donation requirements, including their cold ischemia times when shipping pancreas to Prodo Labs for processing into our islets for distribution. Next is all required paperwork for organ donation is included with each pancreas, and we assure all personnel are well trained to participate in processing each human pancreas. It's really a major team approach.
Forward always.
We have two teams that rotate.
5, 0.
I'm sorry, I don't know what that is.
6,
Oh.
4, 7. Thank you.
anyway, these reagents are appropriate to mix. Is that something from me, Bob? That's
No, that's my error. I thought my mic was off.
okay. So go ahead. So that anyway, we're talking about the second point here that the people personnel are trained. We have two on-call teams that rotate, and that all reagents are appropriate to permit shipping viable human islets to investigators for the research. Prodo Labs has developed a specific proto-islet culture media, and we have three types. The PIMR is a culture media for long-term islet culture conditions. PIMS culture media for short-term islet conditions. And PIMT is separate for the culture media that we successfully ship on our islets on a global basis. This slide provides a lot of information. It's basically showing a human pancreas with the duodenum. And you see right in the middle of the pancreas the red slashes with the red arrows. And that's where about the place where we always routinely divide the pancreas in two and then cannulate the ducts in opposite directions, arrows noted by the arrows, and distend the enzyme into the pancreas in that fashion. This picture also shows two different version pictures of islets, and it also shows in the figure at the bottom islet donation, islet recoveries based on age, and the black bars are post-pure, and the gray bars are post-culture. And another slide, as we go further on in the talk, most of the data I'm going to show you today is in the form of this kind of graph. Are there any questions about this particular slide itself? Okay, then next is some pictures of what it looks like for injection just by into the pancreas by using just black dye rather than the enzyme. Then the digestion filtration chamber, and then islet purification by density gradients. All these are done in our laboratories. I thought to go into more detail, and you can interrupt me with these if you have any questions. The processing steps. So it starts really with the selection of donor pancreas for optimal processing. We have contracts with regional organ procurement organizations to specifically receive donor human pancreases designated only for processing into islets. We screen potential pancreas for research regarding the donor health, diseases, history, disorders, to be certain that we're going to be able to provide disease-free and healthy islets to you. We arrange for pancreas delivery to Prodo Labs from processing these into islets. Since we're located in Southern California, the California OPO is our primary donor source of human islets for human pancreases for processing. Next, on B, we contact the on-call pancreas processing team to come up to the laboratory. Everything is prepackaged and ready to set up in the clean room, and putting all the packs of equipment together. And we receive the human pancreas with paperwork and then open it to make sure it meets our requirements for restart. So it's delivered to the laminar flow trimming hood, where we dissect off all non-pancreatic tissues. And then we dissect and then divide it into two equal pieces, as that first diagram showed. We cannulate each cut in of the pancreatic ducts and inject the digestive enzyme solutions to maximally distend the pancreas. Then we chop and distend the pancreas to equally small pieces. Then we load the distended pancreatic pieces in with containing the collagenase and into the digestion chamber. And we add the remaining digestive solution to the chamber and close the chamber to initiate the digestive solution flow through the chamber and initiate the beginning shaking of the chamber. During this shaking process, we take a series of tissue samples from the chamber during the digestion and look at them underneath the microscope to determine if the digestion is proceeding properly, and decide based upon what those samples look like, then determine the time to stop the digestion step. When that's complete, all digestion chamber liquid, including the pancreatic tissues, are flushed. After they're flushed out of the chamber, then we wash them free of enzyme, and we add them to the cove bag for purification by density gradients using the cove bag, and then wash all the enzyme mixture from purified tissues. At the end of the cove centrifugation, we can readily determine where the islet yield is located, and we pull those off and load them into rinse them and put them in multiple tissue culture flasks containing our islet-specific tissue culture media. Then samples at that time are also taken to do a GSER assay to make certain that they're viable and functional, as well as to rule out any potential microbial contamination. Prior to shipping, the samples are purified. Cultured eudamites are loaded in the shipping flask, which have a degree of controlled temperature in them, and then we ship them to our corporate and academic clients for research. This is an example of the data that I'll be showing you later in a different format, but here we look at number of donors on the y-axis, and on the x-axis, donor age in years. And these are the actual results from 435 processes that we've accomplished, and show you the donor age versus the number of donors. You notice at about 18 years of age, we don't process those pancreases for production because the embeddedness of those islets is so dense. To date, we've not figured out a way to release that embeddedness without damaging the islets. So functionally, all of our islets that are processed are usually 18 years of age and more. And you'll see the vast majority of those run in like 25 to 65. Between 65 and 70, the yields again drop off, mostly because of some fibrosis, but it's kind of anecdotal. And we just have to take those donors and be certain that they're going to give the same high quality islets that the rest delivers. So next we have a series of slides going through different variables. So these slides are all going to look the same way for the next several slides. And this one is looking at donor age. So on the graph itself, you'll see the age at the bottom and the number. For example, the first columns are age 29, and the number of donors in that group were 66. And if you move all the way to the right, you see the age is 60 to 70 years of age, and then it happens to be number 49 at that taste. So then you see the black, the middle color gray, and the light gray columns in each of these. And those stand for pre-purification, post-purification, and post-culture for each one of those age groups. And if you total all those age, for example, let's do this. At the age less than 29, we had 462,628 islets prior to purification. After density gradient purification, that number dropped to 318,180. And after a few days of culture, that number dropped to 227,464. And so you can see here by donor age that there's not a great deal of difference except in the total coming down from 50 years and 60 years beyond. But the islets recovered are really slightly, a little bit increased, but probably not significantly increased through that age period. So you can see in the table there with it that the total yields pre-purification for the donor age were over 2 million, almost 2.2 million at 100% pure, at 100% before purification. I'm sorry, that 100% means the total number of islets that we start with on the preps. And then post-purification, that 2.2 million drops to 1.6 million, which is 73% of what we started with. And after the few days of culture, we continue to lose some islets, and usually they're more damaged. They're not they're ones that are more sensitive to culture damage, to end up with 1.234752 IQ. And in the 400 process, that comes out to about a 56% recovery rate of pure islets. And so in general, we can say here at the bottom note on the left that increasing donor age increases purified islets yield due to embedded islets in the younger donors. So you can see, if you look at the light gray curve itself, you can see that that is increasing versus age. So this kind of data then is what I'm going to present to you for all the other factors that follow. Are there any questions that any of you may have at this point? Okay. Let's look at the critical point of switch time. That switch time is when we've determined, based on our sampling of the islets coming out and the size of the particles left in the digestion chamber, as to when we actually switch to collection. That's what that means. So looking at the numbers, if we look first of all at the pre-purification numbers across the top, the dark bars, they start at 7 minutes of stopping time, going out to greater than 10 minutes of stopping time. We have a small loss, but it's up and down on that first group, from 405,707 down to 376,460 for the greater than 10 minutes. If now we look at the gray middle bars, that's pre-purification, one now sees a trend where we start at less than 7 minutes of process time with a number of 345,780. And you see that gradually goes down to 232,289 as the switch time goes longer. Similarly, we see a similar decline in the purified islets. If we look at the less than 7 minutes at 259,952, it goes down to, even by 9 to 10 minutes, and 10 and greater than 10 minutes, are 188,124. So there is clearly time is an important factor in terms of gaining maximal quality, high quality islets. Same number of processes before, it's almost the same percentages post-culture, but we see increasing process switch time does decrease the final human islet yields. And so being able to be cognizant of this is a very important variable of when to switch. And unfortunately, there's not a totally clear sign of when to switch. We sample as we go through each of these minutes and check the islets and see what they look like. And basically, it's kind of an experience-based decision made as to when we do the switch. And the pancreas process variables are quite significantly different from each other. So it takes some experience to begin to work through this time. But so switch time is important, especially at longer switch times in terms of yields. But the average for all is 50%, 56% recovery post-culture. This next slide looks at BMI, body mass index. This is important as well, but in an opposite way, as we see here. If we look at all the dark bars pre-purification, as we go with very low BMIs, minus 22, Tim, we see 375,000 plus islets. Whereas if we go to 33 BMI, we see 522,000 islets. So that is an interesting observation. If we go to the middle range, we still see it going up. But with final purification, the degree of elevation in those yields over that time, over the increasing BMIs, is somewhat increased from 226,969 at minus 22, and the BMI greater than 33 is 262,889. So again, it's a process of understanding what the basic BMI effect can have on the pancreas, affecting the islets, and then trying to manage that with each process to stop it at the right time to end up with the maximal number of islets. So Across the board with BMI, we're recovering 55.3% after culture. Now we're looking at cold ischemia time, which is important. And on these are in our data. We go from 6 to 8 minutes to 9 to 10 minutes to 11 to 12 minutes to before we start the collection. So what we see in what we see here is a gradual decline in the pre-purification numbers, but we look at the post-purification numbers, they're essentially the same, base versus cold ischemia time. And if we look now at the final post-culture period, we see a little drop from 6 to 8 through 9 to 10 and down to 11 to 12. But it's, again, this data is new. I've not done definitive statistics, which is part of it, what has to be done before I publish this. But the trend is there. And I can tell you anecdotally, going beyond 12 minutes has a precipitous result in terms of these yields, in terms of the processing. The next one here now is looking at the cause of death. And going into this study, I didn't think there was going to be any significant difference in cause of death. And this particular data shows that that's true. If we look at the pre-purification numbers, they're essentially the same. If you look at the post-purification numbers, they're essentially the same. And if we look at the post-culture, they're essentially the same. So basically, the cause of death, at least through these 4 causes, don't have any effect on getting good islet yields from those donors. They're fairly consistent. So we normally will accept patients that have cause of death is anoxia, CVA, stroke, and head trauma routinely in our programs, because we don't see any deleterious effects on our islet yields due to those different donor causes of death diagnoses. If there's no more, I've got more going. Are there any questions at this time? Okay. Let's look at race. Race again. I didn't think there would be any effect on this, but until we actually did the numbers, we find there really is no effect of race, whether we look at pre-purification numbers, post-purification numbers, or post-culture. Now, we only have an N of 4 in Native American donors in these numbers of cases, but so those numbers weren't not included in the averages. So whether a donor is African American, Asian, Caucasian, or Hispanic, the results are essentially the same in terms of these 396 processes that we're able to evaluate race. Finally, then, if we look at the total results over time, these are those data collected from 2014 through 2022. And what we see in 2014, 11,400 plus islets total delivered to date, shipped. These data are shipped to date in numbers, so it's the post-culture numbers. 2015 is essentially the same. 2016 goes up to 12,500. Millions. Start over. 11.4 million in 2014, 11.4 million in 2015, 12.5 million delivered in 2016, similarly 12.3 in 2017. 2018 goes up to 13 million. 2019 is 15 million. We've not been able to identify a specific reason for that change, except in general over those years, we have been able to be more choosy about condition of the donor pancreas in our selection. But I can't tell you there is a specific single thing. It's a combination of donor characteristics and donor problems. that allow us to make, I think, better decisions about what donors we want to process. But I can't put my finger on one or two things that caused this jump. 2020 was an anomalous period because of COVID. And if we look at 2021, again, we have 15.7 million islets processed and delivered. And 2022 is down for that for a bit, 14.3 million islets shipped. And I don't have any clear evidence of what that was that may have made that difference at that point in time. So this is, I have data going back prior to 2000 in terms of islet processing. And so I'll be making the decision in terms of publishing this data, whether I should go back and I'm going to go back and look at the data that's much earlier and see what that looks like in terms of possibly adding it to this slide. So are there any questions at this point? Because the next slide is just a summary slide that anyone has. I'll be glad to answer. Well, let me run through the summary slide first. So first, our first point summary is large-scale human islet processing from designated pancreases for research are available from multi-organ donors that have donated at least one organ for clinical transplantation. Let me add to that point is that because our local OPO here is so large and so good at channeling donors, it's been a marked advantage for us being located in this site to do these. I can tell you when we take donors from the Midwest and rarely from the East Coast, which we used to do, they were never that extra cold ischemia time that's most often associated with those distances and flight arrangements. We stopped doing it because those numbers were not able to keep up with the levels and the quality of islets that we get from our own local OPO, pancreas quality that allows us to maximize islet recovery during this very extensive digestion of the pancreas and purification. So basically the pancreatic procedures for isolating, purifying, culturing, testing, shipping human islets basically have been standardized now for several years, as you've seen the data. And this global distribution is not only to academic, but also to corporate. And there's no priority based on recipients. It's basically anyone who wants to receive islets from us will do so. And by shipping to Europe, we can show that the data, I didn't show this data to you today, but the shipping islets to Europe and the outcomes there versus local deliveries or regional deliveries in the US aren't significantly different. So this report describes large-scale efforts from 400 human pancreatic processes to maximize the number of human islets for research by utilizing definable methods for islet processing, in vitro islet culture and testing, along with successful shipping on a global basis. And as a part of this, number 3, the islet culturing that I mentioned earlier on in the talk, that you can go back and look at, is those are tissue culture solutions that we have optimized and use here on all this data here. And it is totally for sale for anyone to use in their culture of their islets post-processing. And I can provide more detailed information on that. But that's not part of this particular presentation or this, which will be soon a publication. So this document then looks at all these variables of process switch time, donor age, body mass index, quality, ischemia time, cause of death, race of organ, and the short-term in vitro islet processing and culture procedures. So I hope this is helpful to you. I will be, if you let, back to Bob, if you contact Bob or you can contact me when I have this paper submitted, I'll be glad to report that to you and tell you what it is, an accepted document. If you have any questions, if you're already receiving audits from us and have any questions, most of our users can know that they can call and get questions answered about any of the preparations that they're considering to receive. And our door is open to learn as much as we can, not only from this opportunity that we have, but also, most importantly, from the people doing research with these valuable islets for humans. So I think that's all of my comments today, and I'll be glad to take any other questions, any questions.
I just wanted to straighten out before we, and there's a number of questions on the chat.
Okay.
That you can look at, but just to clarify, the typical switch times for most are probably around 18 to 22 minutes, and yours are shorter. And
yes.
The reason for that is you're pre-incubating the enzyme.
Yes, correct? That's correct.
So that's why your numbers are so different.
That's correct. I didn't make that point, but you're absolutely right.
So just to everyone to be aware, David's modified the procedure. We can start taking questions. If you want to read the chat or you want me to read them?
No, you can just read them to me, Bob. That's okay.
Okay. So Greg asked a question. In the, I guess, the digested timing plot, is the digested timing plot with a single enzyme. In other words, the most of these data, I assume, were using the Roche enzymes, and they even carry over from probably HI to MTF.
Yes.
Is that right?
That is correct. It's a very good question. I've not analyzed the data based on that. Partly because the use of those different enzymes came historically at different times.
Yes.
That's the primary reason. And the secondary reason is I don't know if I want to know that data in terms of corporate. I don't know if it's part of. You tell me, Bob. Do I have risk in reporting that data from different vendors, or do I not have risk?
I don't think so. I think it's just. I mean, there was my recollection. No, I guess that was different. I don't know. We'd almost have to go. The people would have the best data on this would actually be the Edmonton group.
Yeah, that's true.
They switched over from DHI to the MTF, but clearly HI changed.
Yes, it did.
Clearly changed in around 2002 or 3 up through 2005 and 7. So it was a different product because of a change in the manufacturing procedure. So you never really have used, because I think probably, I'm assuming from Greg's question, with different enzymes, like a different switch times with other vendors, you just don't have a lot of data on other vendors, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Bal, I think, okay. Let's see, I'm trying to follow this stuff. Tatsuya, Bal, all I have is low islets in this for your question. Tatsuya asked, which courier company do you use for shipping? And what is the cost per IEQ? And I know that varies depending, because you have the Institute versus Prodo.
Yes. Prodo, most of all of it goes through Prodo.
Okay, most of those data are through Prodo.
Well, this data is absolutely all through Prodo.
Okay.
There's not a separate data bank for Sharp Lacey Research Institute.
Okay.
Sharp Lacey Research Institute is the same as everyone else who purchases islets.
Okay. So what courier company do you use for shipping? Because you're going internationally as well.
Yeah. Let me just bring my partner in here because I don't know the answer to that question, but maybe there'll be others. Is which company we use for that? Okay. I'll have that question for you in a minute.
Okay.
Let's get to the end of your other. What else do you have?
And the other issue is just that Tatsuya was asking the question of cost per IEQ.
Cost per IEQ to deliver them from Prodo.
Yes, yes.
Okay. If you'll bear with me, I just walk a couple feet down the hall and I get Brian in here to answer those questions for you. Is that okay?
Got it. Wait a minute a second. So yeah, we're patient and oh yeah, somehow. Yeah, Bal, I can't seem to. Yeah, I understand. I see what you're saying. Jessica, can we put Bal on the line at all? Or
here we go. I'm back. Fortunately, and unfortunately for the answer to the question, Brian's doing a process right now.
Okay, so we can't. We can get back.
Why don't we do it this way?
Get back to Tatsuya on that.
Okay, or I can ship it. I can give you both of this information, and you can distribute it to all the participants if you want.
Yeah. Why don't we do it that way?
Okay, so I'll have that to you today.
Okay, Allison asked, does a high BMI negatively impact the islet quality, if not the quantity? So do you see qualitative differences?
On the what switch factor?
BMIs, high BMIs.
Let me go back to my database here.
So do you see your database was for the quantity, but the
yes,
quality is about the same?
Quality is the same. There's no difference on the quality, just quantity.
Okay.
If we go beyond these numbers, either side of these numbers, in anecdotal numbers, because we don't allow it, but we did see qualitative differences then. And so we just restrict everything to within these numbers. We don't get very many donors under BMI. So we had 68 and 64. So the vast majority are in the middle, 23, 27 through 28, 32.
Okay.
Beyond those numbers, the data is anecdotal.
Okay. Just as a follow-up, Greg asked, can you please describe the pre-incubation procedure with your enzyme? Are you doing both the protease and the full concentration, the collagenase, or is it the protease alone or the collagenase alone?
They're combined.
They are combined.
Right.
But you're doing this in the cold? Or is it room temp?
To ask that question, I'm sorry. I can get that. I'll add it to my list.
Okay.
To send out to everybody this afternoon.
Let's see. Paula asked, the low islet yields and low BMI cases are due to small size pancreas. Is that the case? The low islet yields and low BMI is probably due to smaller pancreas.
Yes. I didn't put that in the numbers, but yes, that's true.
Okay. And Mazir asked, in your right-hand slide of each figure, you have an IEQs in millions. How was that calculated?
Strictly, we took every single process, over 400 processes, and then took those numbers, and that's how they came out. And maybe I don't understand the question.
No, I think you just added them up, right?
Yeah, we just added them up.
You just added them up.
This is this group. That's
all the data that was in your data set.
That's correct. They were divided out depending upon all those different variables that we looked at. They were simply just put in a bucket in terms of the numbers. There was no There were no secondary selection criteria utilized.
Okay. Allison, I've got some Q&A things on the other chart. Do you digest at room temperature or at a normal thermic temperature? I can comment before you comment. At room temperature, actually, there's not much collagen degradation activity.
That's correct. We use body temperature.
Yeah, you use body temperature, and there are people who are at 34, right? 35.
Yeah.
But you have to be pretty high to have the collagenase work. It really,
that's correct.
Biochemical analysis,
Yeah.
you don't get much activity at room temp.
We basically run at 37.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm going to go to the Q&A. Okay, that was Allison, so it's the same thing. Bala asked, it would be interesting to see if the IEQ program pancreas data in low and high BMI cases. And
that data is on that chart, isn't it?
Do you have it? Those are total yields.
So what is he asking for?
He wants it per gram of tissue.
Per gram of tissue, I have that data. I can calculate it for him.
Yeah, it's interesting. Is personally, I look at more the gram of tissue, just to get some ideas of what the differences are. Simply because we don't, as Bala noted before, you don't know whether you got a small pancreas or whatever when you do.
I'll have to clarify that and put that in an answer back to you, which you can distribute to everybody.
Okay. I have a few questions that I could ask you. Since you're probably the longest living islet isolator, David.
For God's good fortune, that's all.
That's a good fortune, right?
Okay, I'll just say I'm 77 years old. So there you go.
Can you comment on what you believe the significant changes, or have there been changes over the years since you started? Clearly, I know the Liberase because I worked doing Liberase, wasn't advanced.
Yes.
But let's say post-Liberase, has much changed, do you think?
No.
And if it did change, that's what I was wondering. That's what I thought your answer would be.
No, not that I can tell. I think the donor qualities are what they are. I don't know that there's any. I don't have any way of. We have all the donor data on all pancreas donors. I haven't systematically looked at it, but our impression of all of my partners and I'm here is there's nothing really major that's changed.
Okay.
But I can look at that and see. And
I'm curious to get your insights because we pay attention to the same things. You're always looking for something that's going to make a difference. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And it's hard. And that this follows up for asking the second comment. When I think about human islet isolation, it's impacted by three factors. Clearly, the quality of the organ. Second is the expertise of the islet isolation group. Plays huge roles.
Yes, it does.
And the third is the enzyme.
Yes.
I was going to say, let's exclude the organ because that's always a wild card. But how would you weight the importance of the enzyme versus the experience of your islet isolation?
Well, let me just add something to the quality of the organ before we go to the other two.
Sure.
We have, again, because we're only working through a single OPO, we have total access to all that data that they have on all the donors. And we receive that with every organ. So we can look down and see the donor's history, the donor's chemistries. And there are times when some of those factors wouldn't necessarily be obvious unless you had that donor history and you looked at it. But sometimes we will turn down a donor for marginal difference in this or that. And the reason we can be picky is, or selective, is because of the large number of donors we have access to.
Okay.
So I think we have, through the years, selected out what we know seems to work best.
That's what I was going to say, yeah.
That goes on. And that's why I want to do the earlier numbers of processes similarly. And I think it'd be important to add to this paper, if I did that, what that historical looked like, because we were not as selective before. We're using donors from the West Coast mountain and all the way to the Midwest. And then we had lots of variables that we really couldn't control.
That's interesting. We got a few more questions or comments. Tatsuya asks, we at the Alberta Islet Distribution Program use only FedEx for shipping, but they do not do a great job of shipping to Europe and Asia, always in delay in delivery, just FYI. And I'll be frank, we've had problems with FedEx. I mean, they're just going down. It's just going downhill. So,
yeah, we don't do that either. I can add the shipping information. Here's what I should do, I think, and tell me what you think about it, is I'll take all these questions, summarize the answers, and send them to you to distribute.
And then we can distribute to everyone who registered.
We'll write down all the answers and experience here. Then you can distribute it to them because you have that list.
Yep, we'll do.
We'll do that. What else do we have?
Min, I ask, do you only take DBD donors?
DBD, what's that?
What is it? Brain dead, right?
Brain dead. Yes, we only use brain dead donors.
Okay. And Justin Manuel said, how long is your culture before shipment?
Usually 2 days.
It is 2 days, okay. I wanted to ask you, team.
Rarely three, but we don't want it. We see a difference if we ship the next day. In terms of their tolerating the shipping. It has to do, I believe, with the islets after 48 hours get out of their previous form and end up in tomorrow, a spherical compacted form.
Okay.
I think that's what's going on with, and that's using our culture media. But that's something you can physically see. And they're not all spheres; they're oblong. They're like little footballs to partially wrap. But I think under 48 hours of culture to us reduces the quality the islets received.
Okay. One question I have, and it's related to somewhat to Justin's question, is there's no question when we talk to people about issues around especially islet recovery, thermolysin plays a huge role.
Yes, it does.
Because it damages the islets, and especially there can be, I've known of groups who have used the whole, and we did a calculation, I should say, of the MTF thermolysin versus what was in Liberase thermolysin, because we did that work when I was at Behringer.
Right.
And I can tell you that the 15 milligrams that Roche puts in is actually equivalent to 24 milligrams because they changed the way they calculated the protein concentration. So it's extremely high. And so my question to you is, do you adjust it down? And because it's clear that there was, from what I could see when they did the MTF, they really didn't, they assumed that people would figure it out. And like I said, there were people who said, okay, since you gave me a 15 milligram bottle, I'll use 15 milligrams. Well, I can tell you that's twice what was in Liberase.
Right.
Liberase was 11, 12, and they're putting in 24 milligrams. So I'm just wondering, from your standpoint, do you adjust the thermolysin dose? And have you changed things as the switch was made? I know this is a tough question.
No, it's answerable by data. I just don't have it in my head. So we'll go back and give that information directly on the answer sheet for all these questions. I'll quote
Good.
the questions, give the answers based not on my memory because it's
No, I get a lot of isolation.
so we'll do it to what the data shows us, and this data only goes this data that I reported on only goes back to 2014. So I have data much earlier than this.
Really?
Yes. So we have data much earlier than this that I will now, due to this discussion and those questions, I will go back and evaluate those changes when they were made, and when because what we tried to do, we noticed as we developed this over the last 20 some years, something would come in and different things. Okay, well, how do we deal with that? We do a few a few processes different ways. Then we make a decision. Okay, this seems to be optimal. We'll keep doing that until something changes again. So it's been a moving. It's been a different eras of time have used different reagents just because that's what was available.
No, and I think you have to realize you didn't have a choice with the Liberase HI. The protease was included.
That's correct.
And then later on, I think the Edmonton group especially started getting individual components and playing around with it. But
well, I think what this discussion has helped me a great deal. Say, I need to go back and look at these different time periods that I can identify where these kind of changes were made.
Yes.
And how does that affect the outcome? The data I've chosen here from 2014 to current, there have been no major changes.
Okay.
So I think it'll be valuable.
You're probably right. 2014. We can chat. There may have been one change you're not aware of, but I can chat with you offline on that.
Sure, that's fine.
No.
So I think what I'm taking away a message here that I want to do is to answer those important questions by historical, because we go back so far.
Yes.
I think we're probably the only, no, we're not the only institution that's been processing all this time. There's others. There's other academic centers that processed longer than we have, probably.
Well,
But,
Edmonton, I mean, first top of mind is Edmonton has
yes.
done both for a while, and then they split the clinical away from the research. There's two other questions that come up. Allison asks, do you have any sort of resting period, like cold storage after isolating the cells, or do they head into culture right away?
No, the process of purification seems to be fine. What we've found, what we do is we put them on culture right away, and what we observe is those changes take place over the next 48 hours.
Okay.
And that's the end point of when we use them for our own research or ship them for others' researches, is after that 48 hours.
And Mazar asks, does islet's ability to uptake dithazone decline post-culture? And could that impact islet yield post-culture?
I think the answer to that question is probably yes. I haven't investigated it specifically, but I think yes. Because what we're seeing is the islets are or some of them, depending on prep to prep, some are worse than others. Islets are beat up around the edges when they come out. Not all. The best pancreases, you don't see any beat upness, any ragged edges on the islets. They're almost all perfect, and so that comes through. But included in this data are islets that have been damaged either by what's happened to the donor, that's the most likely change, or what's happened. Does anything happen during the process of getting the pancreas out? So those variables exist, but I don't know how to stabilize them. And it's most, again, we have a major advantage here of common denominator because we're using a single OPO for these data now.
Right. I think it's a real advantage.
Yeah, I think it is too. It certainly has made the uniformity of our product improve greatly.
Right. So just stand up because we're running out of time. It's just worthwhile to remember that you're really shipping very pure islet preps, correct?
That is correct.
Versus what, say, a transplant center would do, where they'd probably use my recollection. I guess on this is about 50% pure islets because they take and mix the high purity fractions with the more impure fractions. So actually, it'd be interesting, and I didn't have time to go through it, to see how your islet yields, when you said nothing's really changed.
Right.
It'd be interesting to see because in the early days, right, everyone used very pure islets.
All of my clinical implant experience was only with very pure islets.
That's what I was going to say. That's.
And I think the reasons why people have gone beyond that is the yields were marginal for long-term cure of their hyperglycemia. And so I think the reason why it's changed is to try to get more islet content into the transplant recipient and ignore any detrimental effects the acinar have, because it'd just be local.
Right. I think we're about done. So as we're cutting up, is there any further questions from anyone of the participants? There is some, again, should be a file available, which we have a table of islet yields, and I had to chase down some of the original authors to make sure it was expressed. And like these aren't total islet numbers, it's islet equivalents per gram, and you can download that. And if you want to contribute to that, that's fine because it's independent of manufacturer. It's curious to see how within the laboratory are there differences between products. Again, thank you, David, very much. This has been a great discussion because of your long history and contributions to the field. And as you said, you have a lot more data you could look at.
I do.
So
I just want to interrupt about 1 second and say, if anyone listening has any specific questions or even general questions at any time, I'm happy to share our experience here with you. And if you guys will send Bob and I each information that I've captured here, then we will organize it. He and I will organize it and distribute it to everybody.
That's great. And I can give you your email address is dscharp, DSCHARP at protolabs.com, right?
Perfect.
So if you want to contact,
directly,
right there on that slide. So there you go.
Yeah, it's on the slide. And don't if you have a question they want to ask, just give me a buzz. I'll be happy to answer it.
Okay.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, and thank all for participating in this webinar. And we plan to have one in Q1 of 2023. All right. Thanks again, David, very much.
Thank you, guys.
I'll sign off.
All right.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.